ladies and gentlemen. How are we all? Good. It's lovely to see you all. Let me introduce myself. My name is Tony. I'm going to be your host for the evening. Welcome to Scottish Memories Live here at the Scottish Storytelling Centre. Now, I've got two incredible guests for you this evening. I think you've probably heard of them. Two broadcasting legends, which I think is the only way to really describe them. So would you please welcome my guests for this evening, Mr. Ross King and Jay Crawford.
Wow. God, this is amazing. Wow. Hi, everyone. Hello. It's so. I was just thinking there, Tony, that talking about there's that old story, you always say, there's an old showbiz story. You only ever play Edinburgh twice in your career, once on the way up, once on the way down. And it's good to be back. No, I was just thinking, the first time I played Edinburgh was the King's. So I think that holds about 1,600. Yeah. Did Panto. Then I did the Playhouse with Summer Holiday, the biggest theatre in the whole of Britain.
3,300, yeah.
And tonight,
and here we are.
Where is my career going?
Well,
second billing to Jay Crawford, eh?
Scottish storytelling. Now, does anyone remember whose catchphrase went like, I want to tell you a story? Remember who that was? Max Bygraves. I've got a story about him sprinkling hash on his cornflakes at a hotel. No, maybe I shouldn't go there, actually, no. But, it's amazing because he would probably be cancelled now with the cancel culture that's going on because, his biggest hit, I think, was standing on the corner watching all the girls go by. You'd get arrested for that now.
So is that, our mics okay? Is it suddenly booming?
Yeah.
You can hear us okay. Because we've got to be really clear because my new friend Ian, who's in here tonight as well, because my wee cousin's here as well, Lauren, and she said to Ian, we're going to go through to Edinburgh and we're going to see cousin Ross. And he said, oh, good, what is it? He said, it's the Scottish Tories. I went, so I really have to go?
Yeah.
Anyway,
hello, welcome.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's all yours.
We'll leave the politics out of it tonight, I think. Anyway, welcome. It's nice to see everybody. Tony, what's next?
Yeah.
Actually, I was just thinking that our old pal Alan Stewart, who does, of course, a brilliant panto here, I said, actually, it's a wee while since I've been in front of a live audience. And he said, well, just do the old thing, imagine everyone's naked.
Oh,
fuck.
Wait, stop looking at my wife.
I'm just looking up an old friend. Way!
Welcome both. It's lovely to have you here. I know. For those of you that don't know, I'll just give a little bit of a background. During lockdown, I started a podcast because that's what everyone did during lockdown. We're all sitting in the house. And I was sending off to various Scottish personalities because I wanted to talk to them about growing up in Scotland and just sharing some memories. And obviously, no one knew who I was, and I'm sending messages on Instagram and everything like that and going, hi, my name's Tony, and would you please be on my podcast? And funnily enough, everyone said no, apart from one man. This man right here. And then after I got Ross on the podcast, he's very kindly helped me get up another couple of guests as well. And then once I had a couple of names, it got very easier to get a lot more names. Anyway, I then had a gentleman called Mark Martin on the podcast, who was on Fourth One. Mark started on a radio station called Edge 1, which also has a sister station, Edge 2, which some of you might have heard of, which you can see are scattered around the place as well, ran by the gentleman on the far end there. Mark said, Tony, do you want a radio show? I went, okay. And now that's how I met this man right here, the incredible Jay Crawford, who's been kind enough to let me do 2 shows a week on his station, The Mug. I know. But all of this is only possible because of the generosity of these two men who have now decided to come on and let me talk to them live on stage as well. So can we just give them another big thank you before we get started? Yeah. So, gents, we've got East and West Coast here.
Yeah.
Jay, you're North Berwick?
I was born in North Berwick, yeah. My mother was born in North Berwick, so, definitely not one of the incomers that North Berwick people like to describe, anyone who wasn't actually born in the town. And there's quite a lot of them now. I was just saying to Ross that the population when I was growing up was around about 5,000. It was 5,000 for decades and decades, and now I think it's 15,000. Right. So it's and they've named it now. I think it was the Sunday Times in one of their polls said that it was the most popular place to live in the UK. So it's a lovely bit of coastline, isn't it? I mean, it really. Beautiful. And my granny's house. I was born in my granny's house on 4th Street, 12 4th Street. So, you know, when you came out my granny's back door and down the steps and down the garden path and opened the gate, you stepped onto the beach with the view of the harbour there. And, you know, you couldn't quite see the Bass Rock, but you could see all the other islands, Fidra and Craigleith and so on, the Lamb. So, you know, it always still feels like home when I drive into North Berwick, down Diddleton Avenue, and you come down, opens up, you've got the putting green and the golf courses on the left-hand side. And that just always, you know, makes me feel really good, actually. You know, that I grew up in a place like that. Hated it at the time, of course, as a teenager, apart from two things. North Berwick swimming pool, where I spent most of my life in the summer, and the music, because the soundtrack to my life growing up was really what influenced me in getting into radio, because it was the Beatles and the Beach Boys and the Kinks and the Small Faces and Tamla Motown and everything that was happening in the 60s. So I grew up listening to that. And that's really why I launched Edge 2, because I like to keep playing that music.
That's fair enough. And you, sir?
Yes.
Other side?
Mawichi?
Yeah.
Yes. Mawichi.
We won't hold it against you. It's absolutely fine.
Well, listen, hey, Glasgow, very warm city. You're there 5 minutes, somebody will set fire to you. No, actually, there's a really weird, this is true. Do you know this, Jay? Glasgow has been voted the friendliest city in the world, and also at one point was the murder capital of Europe. So basically...
In the same week.
In the same week.
Yeah.
So basically, someone will stab you, but they'll get you an Uber to the hospital.
That's it. I mean, you can't do it.
Works really well.
Now, both of you went into broadcasting at a fairly young age.
Yeah. Well, I was 19 when I got the job with Forth. Oh. You know, I might as well get this out there, because we mentioned Robert Powell earlier on. We're talking about him when we were backstage there. And do you know who Robert Powell is? Robert Powell, the actor. Well, I'd been living abroad. I'd gone to London.
You were living as abroad? Or you were living
no, I wasn't living as abroad. I'll leave that part out of the story, I think. But I'd gone to London, and then I ended up in Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia.
Took a left turn.
Yeah, took a wrong turn.
Zimbabwe.
Was there for about 6 months, and a friend of mine that I'd worked with in London, a Scottish guy, he said, Brian, he said, Scotland's qualified for the World Cup. This was 1974. And 1973, he said, they've just he sent me a cutting out the newspaper with Billy Bremner being carried shoulder high at Hampden Park, having beaten Czechoslovakia 2-1. And I thought, right, I'm going. And so I arrived I was like the advance guard for the Tartan Army. I got there in January. It didn't kick off until the 10th of June. And of course, we always get Brazil every time Scotland qualifies for everything. You know, even the home internationals, we always seem to be playing Brazil. But anyway, I got there and ended up in the Greek islands after Scotland got knocked out, sleeping on a beach for a couple of months. And when I came back, I didn't know what I was going to do. I'd gone to drama college in Edinburgh for a while.
Are you just making all this up?
No. I'd gone to drama college, and I really wanted to be an actor. I know you did as well. We both fancied ourselves as James Bond, really. That's the honest God truth. And so my mother threw me a copy of the Evening News, and there was an ad for Radio 4 presenters and producers. And I thought, well, I'm going to apply for that. So you won't believe how I did this, because these days, everybody, you know, it's all very technical. I got... They used to have little cassette players, if anybody remembers Philips cassette players, and you got a little plastic microphone with it. And I tied the microphone to a golf club, and I had my stereo, you know, and I put 4 singles on the stereo, and you know, you used to have auto eject. Right? So I let the 4 singles drop down, and I did a little intro. And I'd read a thing about an interview with Tony Blackburn where he said, program controllers are very, very busy people, so make your tape as short as possible. And I wrote all over my C90 Boots cassette, this is only 4 minutes and 15 seconds long, and I sent it off. There were 600 people applied for the 8 jobs as presenters at Radio 4, and Richard Finlay, who was the boss, said mine was the best one he received because it was the shortest.
Which then led to that.
Well, oh yeah.
Oh,
well,
it's Donny Osmond. Oh my gosh.
I used to get the Donny Osmond thing a bit. I haven't heard it lately. It's more Jack Nicholson than these days, I think. Yeah, it was. I mean, I'd never been a DJ. I didn't know really anything about it, and I used to go in at 6 o'clock in the morning when we start. 2 months before we launched Fourth in January '75, we had a couple of months to practice, and I used to let myself in and go down to the studio at 6 o'clock in the morning and just practice and practice every day, because most of the other guys had done it before, and I was, we were very green, so I didn't know what was happening. Where were you?
You were one of the youngest broadcasters to have a daytime show at 17 years old.
Yeah, well, it actually started a wee bit before that, so I just rewind to being at school, and I was going to be a footballer for Partick Thistle. Partick Thistle nil, to give them the full title. And I went into the you'll have this as well, because Bertie Auld was the manager of Thistle when I was a kid, going into sign as an S form, and Jackie Husband was the assistant manager, and they took me in to the office at Mary Hill with Fir Hill, and I went in and he was watching the ITV7, the races that was on, and it was smoke everywhere because he had cigars, Bertie, and all that stuff. And I came in and Jackie went, "Hey, boss, here's a new boy, it's a new boy." And Bertie looked at me and he went, "You wear out more mirrors than football boots, son." I thought that was it. And then also, slightly rude story, but not too much. This is when I knew my football career was over. One night we're playing, hardly anyone in the ground and all the rest of it. Last minute, we get a penalty. It's 0-0, we get a penalty. So I'm Billy Big Bollocks, captain, give me the ball, all the rest of it. So I put the ball down, and as I run up, I slip, but I'm so confident, I think, I'm sliding, but I can see the goalkeeper moving, so I hit it to the other corner as hard as I could. It was just magnificent. What happened was, the ball actually trickled. And the goalkeeper was like, "Can I pick this up?" So he picked it up, and out of the crowd, I'm not joking, like out of the crowd somebody shouted, "Hey Rossi, I could have hit it harder with a semi." So, I then decided football might not be for me. And then I'd always been the annoying kid at weddings and sang and all that stuff, and been in the school plays. And funny, Gordon Sinclair, who then went on to do Gregory's Girl, we were both in school at the same time. And then my math teacher, Roddy Hood, came to me and said, "I hear a good way to get into showbiz and radio is hospital radio." So I was 15 at the time, so I went to hospital radio in Glasgow, which was amazing. Then when I was there, I heard another great way to get into real radio is to actually become the Saturday boy at Radio Clyde. So I thought, okay. So I thought, okay, right, this is what I'm going to do, some writing a wee letter and all the rest of it. And then Mike Suter, who was one of the news presenters at the time, was at hospital radio. And I got so worked up because you know that everyone really wanted this job, because it was, when you were the Saturday boy, you were going to get £10. It was going to be a big into Radio Clyde. And Mike Suter said, "It's all right, I know the guy to phone." So he picks up the phone, calls the man who's in charge of all this, and I'm expecting him to do the introduction. And when the person answered the phone, he just handed it to me. That man is sitting there. That's Paul Cooney.
Paul Cooney. Yeah. Well, I think Paul started a bit like that yourself, didn't you? Didn't you start?
Waiting, you got my number. Best call I ever took.
So that was, and
Clyde radio. There were a lot of comparisons made between Clyde being in Glasgow and Forth being in Edinburgh, obviously, and Clyde was enormous. I mean, to put it into perspective, it was the most successful commercial radio station in Europe, not only just for audience, but also financially. They were making money, and nobody else in commercial radio was making money. Even Capital Radio, which was the first proper commercial radio, because LBC had launched before that, but Capital launched in 1973, and I think it took them about 10 years to make a profit. Clyde was fantastic, and all the presenters there were huge stars in Glasgow. And when Radio 4 launched, it wasn't, Edinburgh, with respect, didn't quite take us in the same way. It took a bit of time to win over the audience in Edinburgh. And at the time, it was a huge transmission area, because we went from Dundee to Berwick and over to Stirling. And there was a bit in the middle where the two stations overlapped. And there was a very great photograph. I was looking for it. I hope to be able to find a copy of it and bring it along. But it was, we took a photograph with all the Radio 4 DJs and all the Radio Clyde DJs having a tug of war under the statue of Robert the Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn site. Right? But we decided to have a charity football match. And so there was a bus coming to pick us all up at 4th Street. And all the presenters, and we all got in there, and the guys that were playing, you know, and I was 20, so I was pretty fit at the time. And anyway, we're approaching Glasgow, the outskirts of Glasgow, and suddenly a couple of motorcycles, cops, came alongside us to escort us to the ground. We thought, really? Wow. And then I'm thinking, you know, as we were getting closer to the ground, which we didn't know really where it was, I think it was Springburn, which was a junior football club through there. And we were on the bus saying, there must be a Sunday market on around here. Where are all these people going? And there were 12,000 people at the game. It was absolutely packed. I mean, I think the ground only held about 10,000. It was just absolutely mobbed. And Tim Stevens, Tiger Tim, was like, you know, the big star there, you know, and all the girls are going mad. And I scored a hat trick, right? And we were beaten 4-3. But it was, you know, we used to have an annual game every night, and there was always a bit of rivalry between the two stations. And then, of course, I went there in 1987, left 4th. I'd been there 12 years, and it was coming up for the 13th anniversary, and I thought, that doesn't sound lucky. I'm going to go to Radio Clyde. So I went there, and Rossi and I had met quite a few times before that. I remember us meeting before I came to Clyde. We were both at the first night of Chess, the musical. Do you remember that?
Yeah, we actually met in football. That was the very first time. You won't remember, because I was the kid. I was the 17-year-old kid that Richard Park pushed out as the kind of ringer.
Right.
But that was the very first time that I met you, because Jay obviously, you know, legend. So I remember that. But yeah, it was the concept album of Chess.
Yes,
Barbara Dixon.
That's right, Barbara Dixon. And I remember
London.
B.A. Robertson being there, Brian Robertson being there, and various other people. But, you know, we just got on very well, you know, from the first time that we met, or the second time we met, or whenever. But and then, of course, I went to Clyde, and Ross was a huge star on the station. And I think you need to tell everybody the story about the band handing in their demo cassette because Clyde moved from the city centre out to Clyde Bank. And there was a local band who said, well, we're going to hand in, we've recorded a couple of songs, we're going to hand it in. Yeah. And they
came in and they had this demo tape, and I was like, okay, great. And then I said, what's your name? And he said, my name's Mark McLaughlin, but I'm going to be called Marty Pello.
Yeah.
Wet.
And this is one of the things that used to happen with commercial radio in those days with 4th and Clyde and Tay and North Sound. You can almost track it. In fact, I wrote a piece for the Radio Academy back in the 80s about the first 10 years of commercial radio in Scotland. And prior to 1974, with the launch of Clyde, I think there was something like 13 or 14, maybe 15 Scottish artists had made the top 40 in the UK charts. You know, people like Lulu, Nazareth, The Average White Band, whatever. And in the first 10 years of commercial radio, there was something like 45 Scottish acts that made the top 40, because then suddenly you had Deacon Blue and Delamitri and Simple Minds and so. I mean, I remember going to Simple Minds' first gig. It was in a barn on the outskirts of Edinburgh, out by Riccarton, that was being rented by a guy called Lenny Love, who sadly passed away about a year ago. and Bruce Finlay had signed this band, and young guys from Glasgow, and they're Simple Minds. You want to come to the gig? They're going to play in Lenny's barn. So went along, and this is the first of Simple Minds, you know, and they're still going strong, you know. And a lot of that was to do with the way that commercial radio helped in two ways, I think. First of all, we would play the demos, we'd play the new songs, we'd support the artists. But it also meant that because of Forth and Clyde's success, the record companies had to hire guys to come and let us hear their new singles that they were releasing. So we had the pluggers, as they were called, coming in every week, every day. They'd be coming in from EMI and CBS and Warner's and so on. And while they were there, they were hearing some of these demos. And that's what happened with Wet, Wet, Wet. They got signed to Phonogram, Mercury Records, and the rest is history.
Because they came in and saw this man.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Oh, my God. Good grief.
Yeah.
You know, actually, when I messaged both Jay and Ross, and I said, can I have some pictures? It'd be great to have some pictures. So Jay very kindly sent some pictures. Ross sent some pictures. And some pictures. And some pictures.
Oh, look at that.
Oh,
Oh!
yes.
I was a little bit worried when he sent me that one, to be completely honest.
Hey, you're saying I'm dressing up.
Actually, the great thing is you can see from these photographs, one of his hair is natural and the other one's dyed white.
I can't comment on that, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
Ross, I told you that one of my questions was going to be about stockings and suspenders.
You did indeed, yeah.
Well, there it goes. Yeah.
I might change that question slightly and ask you, are you wearing the same boots tonight?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Doesn't make you a bad person. Only at weekends. Oh, no, we were lucky because also, as Paul well knows, back in those radio days, that was a great thing because it was local radio. So, you know, I could play, you know, one of my wonderful listeners from way, way back. So, you know, you could play Spandau Ballet, you could play Wet, Wet, Wet's demo, and then play Duran Duran.
Yeah.
So obviously, young kids were going, they're a big pop band because they're on the radio. So that was the great joy that just doesn't happen now, unfortunately.
Well, it does.
On the edge.
Yeah, Edge. Well, you know, that's one of the things that I really enjoy and still get a kick out of it. I mean, this is my 51st year in radio, and you know, we just launched Edge 3 last Friday, which is a new country station for Edinburgh, because that's the fastest, biggest growing genre that Sam Hinks keeps telling me about. He's sitting up there. Edge 1 and Edge 2, particularly Edge 2, we're playing all those Scottish bands. We're playing Average White Band and Simple Minds and the new artists as well, and people like Paolo Nutini and Natty from Edinburgh. I don't know if you've heard Natty. She's brilliant. There's lots of new artists that are coming through, and it's great to be able to give them a bit of support, you know.
While we're kind of on that, obviously there is you with the original
That's
fourth team.
That was a very famous photograph, right? So, you know, some of them no longer with us, unfortunately.
Are we going to play Deed or No Deed?
Well, oh really? Well, that's me. Third from the left there. Chris John, sadly no longer with us, but Mike Gower, Steve Hamilton, Barbara Brown, Dougie King. Dave Anthony, who's the guy just second from the right, he was former Radio 1. He'd been on Radio Luxembourg and Radio 1. So he kind of took me under his wing a bit, and he really helped me in the early days, you know. And then he left Forth in the first year because they weren't making money, and so they had lots of cutbacks. And because he was the Radio 1 DJ, he was the highest paid. I was actually the lowest paid. So that's why they kept me on. But he disappeared after that. And, you know, many times I tried, he's not here tonight, is he? But many times I tried to find him, you know, especially, you know, with Facebook and internet searches and so on. I've never been able to track him down or what happened to him. But he was a lovely man, and I owe so much to him. And I wish I'd caught up with him at some point just to say thanks.
Yeah, but that must have been incredibly special, starting a radio station. I've got another one there as well, of you sitting on the ramparts.
Yeah, that was the same day, you know, just, I grew that beard. I had a beard there because, Noel Edmonds was
I was
one
going
of
to
the
say,
biggest
there's a Noel Edmonds look about it.
and I thought, well, I'll go for a kind of Noel Edmonds, have a wee beard kind of thing,
More Mr. Blobby, wasn't it?
No, that's Mr. Blobby on the left. And I got the chance to go to Radio 1 in the 80s, and they phoned me. I just came out of the blue, and they phoned me up and said, Derek Chinnery wants to have a chat with you, and he was the head of Radio 1 at the time. And so I met them in the King James Hotel, and funnily enough, I'm sitting there with Derek Chinnery and two of the senior producers from Radio 1. And the first person that walked into the bar while I was sitting there was Noel Edmonds, which was kind of weird. But they made me an offer to go down and do the breakfast show on Radio 1 on a Saturday morning. That's where they used to start everyone. That's where Noel had started and everybody else. So, and it was £120 a week. And they wanted me to fly down or get the train down and be there on it from a Tuesday right through. And I thought, 120 quid a week. I mean, even not bad in the 80s, but it just wasn't going to do it. It wasn't going to come out. And I said, I can't do that. I'd bought a house. I was living at Camo out by Barnton at the time. I'd bought a house there, and I thought, I won't be able to afford the mortgage or whatever. Yeah. And I didn't go. They were desperate to get a Scottish voice because they hadn't had one since Stuart Henry. And he was a lovely man. And so they were trying to get me to go down, and I didn't do it. And if I've got any regrets, it's that maybe I didn't do that because the next thing was Mark Goodyear, who'd started off as the warm-up on the Radio 4th Roadshows when he was 16. And the next thing, here's Mark Goodyear on Top of the Pops. And I thought, shit, I could have been doing Top of the Pops. It never even occurred to me,
Do you know what? It's really weird, because you don't know this. I didn't know that Radio 1 story. So I got approached by Radio 1.
Did you?
So it must have been, obviously, it would be a couple of years after, but it was the same thing. And they offered me, it was a Saturday night show that they offered me. And it was Doreen Davis and Johnny Beerling.
Yes, and they were the other two that were at the meeting.
And again, it was the same thing. And the money, I think, had gone up to about 200 by then.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
And it was the same thing. And of course, at that time, we were killing it in gigs in Glasgow, doing three gigs a night, 3 clubs a night, and things like that.
Did they ask you what school you went to?
No, that was the Rangers scout that came.
That was, because I thought it was a strange thing to do, because I was sitting at the, having the chat with them, and Derek Chinnery said, and this is a true story, right? So he said, what school did you go to? I said, well, I grew up in North Berwick, Mr. Chinnery, and I went to school in North Berwick High School. It's a very good school. He said, well, you realise all Radio 1 DJs are public school boys.
That's right, yeah.
And I said, that's going to come as a shock to Jimmy Savile. And he said, well, Jimmy's the exception. I thought, well, you're right there.
How right they were. Wow.
Yeah.
And when I then said no, and then Peter Powell, do you remember Peter Powell was a Radio 1 DJ? Peter wanted to manage me in every way. And Peter Powell, he was like that, 275 and 285 and BBC National Radio 1. And I remember coming out, and I remember saying, I've just turned it down. And he screamed at me outside Broadcasting House, nobody ever turns down Radio 1, blah, blah, you'll never work again, and screamed and screamed and screamed. And then the person, because obviously they were, because Stuart Henry was the only Scottish voice, it was Nicky Campbell who got
and Nicky got the job. And he was on North Sound.
Yeah.
And, I think I can tell this story because I met the man himself, and he told me he'd got Nicky the job, and it was...
it's a lean-in job, sorry.
Sorry. So, Jonathan, I'm just going to say Jonathan.
Okay.
Go on, G, say it, spit out.
There we are. Exactly.
He had a couple of minor hits, and he used to do a program on the television.
Surname is me.
Yeah. No. No, not that one.
Oh,
no.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. I think he did a bit of Time a few years ago.
He's the one I'm talking about. No? All right.
Yeah.
Leave it.
Yeah. Yes, you might be right. Yeah.
But then you ended up with, I've got down here, hosting 30 different television series.
I know. Everyone a flop.
What?
Still trying to find one.
Listen, we've got sitting here, you know, amongst almost royalty, you know, because he was, you know, he went away to see the king yesterday. But anyway, is it 4 Emmys?
4 Emmys, yeah.
4 Emmy Awards.
But that must have been a huge decision to move over to LA, though.
I'd also Duke of Edinburgh bronze. Sorry, can we mention that?
Oh, yeah?
Cycling proficiency.
Yes. Excuse me. 50 yards breaststroke. North Berwick swimming pool.
That was in one of those clubs for them. Never went near a swimming pool. But yeah, no, it's funny. My girlfriend Bridget's here, and I called Jay yesterday, and I said we're at Balmoral, and he thought it was at the Balmoral Hotel.
Yeah.
I said no, we're actually at Balmoral.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was it.
No,
Yeah.
I was just saying, I mean, it must have been a big thing to move over LA. Why did that decision come into your head?
I'll be really, really honest. I was lucky. I'd gone off to do some musicals, and I was loving it. And I did the Rocky Horror Show, and then I was doing a musical at Sadler's Wells in London. And I remember, it's really funny, the feeling comes back when I walk on the stage sometimes, and then I look up and I look at the gantry and I see the lights. And this was 1999, and I'd been offered a couple of other musicals, which was lovely, and everything was great. And I got backstage at Sadler's Wells, and I looked up and I thought, why am I not excited? Why am I just, I felt a bit, and I thought, this is ridiculous. And it's not like me at all. You know, my family, they're actually, one of those photographs, I've got to say this, the one when I had the big mullet, my little sister Elaine is here, and every time I go out to the gig, what did I say, Elaine? Turn my hair under the back. And so it's not like me at all. I've always been very enthusiastic and love what I do and realise how incredibly lucky I am to do what I do. I don't know, it was like, you know, you were putting the foot in the pedal, there was just nothing there. And I thought, you know what, I have to do something different. I just have to. And I'd had a couple of offers to go to America when I was younger, which thankfully I didn't take, because I think it would have blown my mind a little bit. And then I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go. I'm not going to, no big fanfare or nothing. Just going to go and just see a couple of cases. Went to LA and didn't really have any real contacts. You know, I say that despite the fact that Catherine Zeta-Jones dropped me off at my agents at the time.
Well, you were, you know, I've got to tell you this story because, you know, and I'll let Ross take it up when he feels like it. But he came to see me at Real Radio a few years ago, you know, back about 2005, something like that, 2006. And I got a phone call from him and JJ, I'm going to be in Glasgow. You know, I was going to look in and see you at Real Radio. I said, yeah, come and see me. You know, I'm dying to catch up. And Dawn and I, this is my wife Dawn sitting over here. Dawn and I had been on a flight and she'd got a copy of Hello magazine a couple of years ago, before this, you see. And so I'm on the flight and eventually I pick it up and flicking through it. Oh, wait a minute, there's Ross. At the wedding of Catherine Zeta-Jones and Michael Douglas.
I was a waiter.
So I said, oh my God, you know, there's Ross at this wedding. And so I said, you know, I said, you were at that wedding? And he said, yeah, Plaza in New York, it was fantastic. I said, who was on your table? And who was on your table?
Oh my goodness me.
Russell Crowe. Right, I'll keep you up. I'll keep you right. And he said, I'm going to really upset you now, Jay. And I said, okay. I said, go on, just hit me with it. Give me the story. He said, at the wedding, I danced with Goldie Hawn. And I was like, oh, get out.
I don't quite think that's what you said.
Yeah. Well, something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, and you know, I think Ross has done so. I mean, his career has been so much more varied than mine. But you know, to go to America, anyone going from the UK, you know, when you think of the bands that have made it big in the States and the actors that have made it big in the States, any of the personalities that have gone over there and done well, it's such a competitive industry over there. And if you can make it, well, you can make it anywhere. I think that we should do a
song.
But if you don't mind me saying, you did it in a unique way. You entered the competition.
Yeah, it was a very weird thing. Actually, sorry, just when JJ was talking about singing, the one thing, and Elaine and I used to talk about this a lot, and Paul as well, that when we would listen to Radio 1 when we were kids, I loved when they talked about, like, they were on the Radio 1 roadshow, and they talked about they'd all been out for dinner or they'd gone out to a club, and I loved that camaraderie. And so when JJ joined Clyde, and I was doing the lunchtime show, Jay did the afternoon show, and we had this lovely, you know, when you do the handover, which I used to always love in radio, which you don't really get at all now, and I used to love all that, and JJ and I we'd always come up with something silly, and then we actually ended up singing one time, I'm a Believer. Remember that?
No.
No. And we just jumped into the whole stuff, and it was just, I loved the fact that we were good pals, and that I think that came across in the radio, and, you know, you would hear people and you go, I really wanted Tony Blackburn and Noel Edmonds to be pals and things like that. So it was,
well, Sam here does the breakfast show on Edge too, and we do that almost every morning. We do a wee, we do a wee handover like that, because I think you're absolutely right, and I always like that, because you like to think that, you know, one of the things about radio, and I've always said this to presenters that I've worked with over the years, is you have to respect that you're invited into someone's home. You're invited into a personal space. And I used to say to presenters, you know, at Real Radio and so on, at one time I was running Real for the UK. And so I did a lot of sessions with presenters one-to-one. And I would always say, you know, think about, you know, when you're being shown around someone's house, this is something you can all relate to. You know, someone says, you know, you go round to a friend's and they say, oh, let me show you around, I'll give you the 5-bob tour, right? And you get to the bedroom, you get to their bedroom, and you know, you get to the threshold, and you go, oh yeah, that's very nice. No, come in and have a look. No, you just sort of, oh, that's very nice, yeah. You just don't want to go in there, really. No, come and have a look at the ensuite. You know, look at it. No, oh yeah, so I can see it from here. That's fine. You know, people tend to react like that. And I said, you know, but every morning when I was doing the breakfast show on Fourth One, for example, every morning I was on their bedside table, right next to them, you know, waking them up in the morning. And I thought that was an incredible thing to do, and something that you have to respect. And it's one of the reasons that you'll never hear people swearing on the radio. You know, I mean, look at the movies now and television. You never forget the watershed. Happens all the time, you know. But in radio, we've still got that respect for the listener. And, you know, it's always a one-to-one relationship. You talk to people. I don't go on and say, good morning, folks, you know, because you get somebody in a car going, who's he talking to? There's only me here. So it's that one-to-one relationship, and it's something that's really special. And you know, the funny thing is that here we are, all these years later, and as I say, been doing it for 50 years, and commercial radio is now the most successful it's ever been in the UK. We've still got 90% of the population, 90% of all adults in the UK listen to the radio at least once a week, right? And now the commercial radio as a whole is now beating the BBC, has taken over, has got a bigger audience than the BBC. So although things have changed a lot, and they've certainly changed a lot at Forth and Clyde, and you wouldn't recognize them compared to, you know, when we were there, because Forth, for example, moved out of Forth House. Forth 2 doesn't exist anymore. Fourth One just has the breakfast show with Boogie and Arlene, who do a great job. I know them both very well. They're good broadcasters, and they've been very successful. But that's it. That's the only show that's coming from Edinburgh. Everything else comes from Clydebank, you know, because it's now been taken over by Bauer, and everything's getting networked around Scotland. And eventually, I dare say, it'll just be the whole of the UK that is networked on those stations. So we've kind of lost something there. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to, you know, launch Edge, to give Edinburgh and to give, you know, the east of Scotland something back, you know, with my own experience over the years, and as I say, support Scottish artists and support Edinburgh and Edinburgh businesses.
And I think on that note, that is the perfect time to let you all head up to the bar. We're going to take a short 15-minute interval, and then please come back for about past, if that's okay, everyone. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. Everyone feeling refreshed? Hey! So when I reached out to these two gentlemen, as you've noticed already, I asked for pictures. And both of them, being as shy as they are, took a little bit of persuasion, but they very kindly sent me some pictures. So I thought we'd work our way through a couple of them. And the first one, actually, you both sent.
Did we?
You both sent with this gentleman right here.
Oh. Well, do you know where we used to be, where Radio 4th was in 4th Street? It was Radio 4th, 4th House, 4th Street. And there were lots of other offices in 4th Street. And we had all sorts of stars that used to turn up, and Clyde was the same. People would come for interviews and so on. And, people, we had Charlton Heston, we had Sophia Loren, we had all sorts of people that would turn up for interviews, and people that were, doing their autobiography or something like that. And Cliff Richard came quite regularly. And he, funnily enough, always got the biggest crowd of people. Because all the women would come out the offices round about to watch him getting out his car and coming in for the interview, and then they would all hang about for about an hour because they knew he'd be out after that. So that one with me there, that Bill Torrance with the beard sitting, I'm standing behind him, and Mike Gower and Chris Johns. So that must have been, I guess, maybe about 1976, I think, something like that. And I'd actually been coming along the corridor. I think that was the second time I met him. The first time, I was coming along the corridor at 4th towards the studios, and I didn't know he was in the building, but he came out the studio after being interviewed, and someone introduced him and said, oh, Cliff, this is Jay Crawford. He's one of our DJs here. And he said, oh, yeah, we've met before. How are you? And I said, no, we've not met before. Yes, we have. Don't tell me. I know you from somewhere. I said, no, really? No, you have. Yeah, no, I've definitely met you before. I thought, God, if I'd met Cliff Richard before, I would remember, And I couldn't convince him that we'd never met. It was strange, but I interviewed him a couple of times. He was always, I found that, I'm sure you may have found this too with your adventures in Los Angeles, but a lot of the times, the bigger the star, the longer that they've been in the business, actually, the nicer they are. They tend to be, because they've gone through that. It's the young bands, the young artists that come in full of it, and we're going to take over the world kind of thing. And sometimes you never hear from them again. But the ones that have been around for a long time tend to be the nicest. Do you know, Mike?
Yeah, especially with Cliff. I did Summer Holiday, the musical, which obviously was the musical of the movie. And then Cliff and I became good pals, been good friends for a long time. But one of my lovely moments with him was that we were doing a gig at Wimbledon Theatre, and I was doing a bit of the first half, and then Cliff was doing the whole of the second half. We're just doing it as an acoustic set. And in the first half, they said, we're going to do this scenery change and move stuff and all the rest of it. So Rossi, you have to fill 15 minutes. And I was like, I don't want to do gags for 15 minutes. But we had a really good band. So the band were in the pit, and Cliff's guitar tech was over at the side. And I said to the band, we'll just do like a rock and roll medley, because I thought they'll know it. And I said, well, Great Balls of Fire in C, blah, 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 blah. And Cliff's guitar tech went, Ross, Cliff does Great Balls of Fire. Oh. I went, I think Cliff's got enough hits of his own. So I was so it comes to the second half, so I go, blah, 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 blah. And it's kind of, I was always taught this thing, introducing people. I went, the bigger the star, the shorter the introduction. Yeah. Cliff Richard! Cliff comes out, storms it, it's great. But 4 songs in, he says, I'd like to do another song for you. I'm going to do Great Balls of Fire. I know Ross did it earlier, but I do it better. and he did.
Does he support you in the States? Because he never really made it in the States. So, and you have. So, that's something. I think Devil Woman was the only hit he had in America.
Yeah. You just said you played Summer Holiday, which you did at the Playhouse, which I saw you in that.
Oh, well done.
But going on at the Playhouse,
yes,
the next picture you sent, I think you had something to do with this gentleman at the Playhouse as well, Jay, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, John.
Well, You know, we never really got the credit for it, I don't think, but Radio 4 saved the Playhouse. There was a guy called Jock Maxwell, a lovely man, and he owned the Playhouse, lock, stock and barrel. And Edinburgh City Council, in their wisdom, wanted to knock it down. And they were going to demolish the Playhouse. And it wasn't making any money. It was actually operating as a cinema at the time. And the funny thing was, it had been built in the late 1920s, and they weren't sure if talkies were going to take off or not. So they built it as a theatre and a cinema, just in case. But Jock Maxwell was prepared to sell the Playhouse for £1 to anyone that would take it on and stop the council knocking it down. So Elton had come in to Forth, and we were interviewing Elton. And one of the guys that worked at Forth as an engineer, he was the chairman of an organisation called STOPS, the Scottish Theatre Organ Preservation Society. And in the Playhouse, there used to be one of these big sort of organs that came out of the pit, right? It used to come out, and this was back to the days...
Is this a story about Elton John's organ? I just want to know.
Yes, it is.
Before we go any further, there are children present.
We could get there, but no. So we thought, oh, you know, he was trying to save the organ in the Playhouse. We were trying to save the Playhouse itself. So Elton had come in and we said, listen, this is what's going on. Would you come over and we'll get a photograph of you, you know, playing the organ in the Playhouse and try and save the theatre. So we're over there with Elton, and he's sitting there going, oh, this is great, you know. And well, he loves an organ. And so he said, I'm going to speak to my manager. We've got to save this place. So he phoned his manager, John Reid. And,
a friend of my friend Daniel B.
All right.
Yeah.
And John Reid, of course, was managing, among others, Queen, right? And Kiki D and Billy Connolly. And so we got together and came up with a plan. And so we put on in 1976 the Edinburgh Festival of Pop. And we did 28 gigs over 4 weeks in the Playhouse with Crosby and Nash. Elton did his first ever solo concert in the Playhouse. And that was the first time, Radio Clyde helped us out with this as well, and Dougie Donnelly and I introduced the evening it was the first ever simulcast of a commercial radio station and a television station. STV filmed it and Forth and Clyde broadcast it in stereo. And we told people, if you want to hear it in stereo, because they didn't have stereo on the telly, listen to the radio and you'll hear it in stereo, just turn the sound down on your telly. And Kiki D came on at the end. No, I'm lying. Kiki D did a concert and Elton came on at the end and they sang Don't Go Breaking My Heart, which was the first time that had ever been performed live. We had Rainbow, Richie Blackmore, we had all these different bands, and I was introducing them every night. So they asked me to do that, and so I was hanging out with everybody backstage at the Playhouse, and there was a party every night, and Elton had a party, and he was staying in Ann Street. They'd rented a house in Ann Street. Anyone from Edinburgh will know that's one of the poshest streets in the city, and there was a party every night, you know, and I just had a ball. And I think, actually, to be honest, I think I was pretty much the only straight guy that was in the whole company there. But yeah, and Elton, you know, so Elton John, John Reid, Queen, Radio Forth, we saved the Playhouse.
Hey.
See, this man's now got another connection to me because not that long ago, I was one of the assistant managers at the Playhouse. With those three young ladies over there as well. So.
Well done, ladies.
Moving on, we have Phil Collins.
Phil Collins. I've got to tell you a story about Phil Collins, right? So, sorry, and then...
No, I'm loving it.
At the Playhouse, I introduced them. It was the Wind and Wuthering tour. Genesis had an album out, the first album with Phil Collins doing the vocals. Peter Gabriel had left. And so they did 3 nights at the Playhouse, and I was introducing them on stage every night. And Phil Collins said to me, I need some new jeans. Where can I go to get some jeans? And I said, well, there's a friend of mine has a shop in in Rose Street. I'll take you there. Went along. He got about half a dozen pairs of jeans. And I had dinner with them a couple of nights. I met him, interviewed him several times in that period. And every single time I met him, he didn't have a clue who I was. Every time, you know. And other people that I met maybe once and met them a year later, and I go, hey, Jay, how you doing? You know.
And Cliff Richard never actually met you.
Exactly. Yeah. So I even went to, the record company one time flew me to Zurich, to Switzerland, to go to his house and listen to the new solo album that he had coming out. And I said to the guy from the record company, I said, he never remembers me. He said, I took him shopping for jeans. You know, he never remembers me. So he'd actually said to Phil Collins, for God's sake, you know, we've got this guy, he's the head of music and blah, 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 blah. You know, his name's Jay Crawford. You've met him loads of times. You probably won't remember, but just say you do, okay? So that time I went in and he went, oh, Jay, nice to see you again. But I knew it was a lie.
I've combined two of your pictures together now, Ross, because you sent two with the same person,
Yeah.
so I had to really.
Oh.
Wow, Dolly.
Yeah. And Jennifer Aniston.
And Jennifer Aniston just on the side there.
JJ, you don't know this story, but you will really appreciate it. So I'm one of the first big parties that I've been to in LA. And there's a gentleman on my right-hand side and another young guy on the left-hand side here, and there's a guitar sitting there. So I've now met this guy, and I've got to know him reasonably well. So this young kid's there in the guitar, so he says, I just pick up the guitar. I was like, yeah, sure. So I pick up, I have 3 chords, right? That's it. So kid says, oh, I'm in a band. I was like, oh, good, well, you play. So I hand it to him. He was even worse than I was. So I said, you give it to my friend here? He went, yeah, okay, man. He handed it to him. And my friend says, what do you want me to play? And I said, play one of the songs you wrote for Elvis.
Oh, really?
It was Mac Davis who wrote In the Ghetto.
Wow.
And that list so he starts to play, and Mac was just the loveliest man. He goes, and a baby cries, in the ghetto. And he stops, and I was like, no, keep going, keep going, keep going. He said, I was there when he recorded it, and Elvis sings, and if you listen to Elvis singing it, he sings in the ghetto. Yeah. And he said, Elvis, you're in the ghetto. No, you know, nobody lives in the ghetto. It's the ghetto. So he said, every time I hear that song on the radio, it annoys me. Yeah. It makes me millions, but it annoys me. Cut to, I go to see Dolly. This was one time at Dollywood where she was obviously dressed up a little bit fancy. And so Gary Barlow from Take That had said to me, when you see Dolly, will you say to her, I'd love to write with her? So I was like, okay, no problem. So I see Dolly, I said, look, Gary Barlow is this big band, Take That, da, da, da. She said, well, honey, she said, you know, I just normally I just write with Mac Davis. Do you know Mac Davis? Do I know Mac Davis? Let me tell you this story. I do the whole story, as I've just told you, and then she said, honey, I just got to go make a phone call. I got to speak to Mac. And I said, what, do you not believe my story? She said, no. She said, I recorded in the ghetto, and I sang in the ghetto. And I've got to apologize. And then we're very quickly the story about Dolly. She is, you know, one of those people, everything you want her to be, she is exactly that woman. And she always remembers you. Well, maybe not you. But so I was really lucky. I wrote 3 novels with my friend Shari Lowe, and Dolly loves books, and she's got this imagination charity because she grew up very poor. Dad couldn't read, so the whole thing is to encourage people to read. So I knew that she liked books. So I said to Dolly, you know, and she went, hey, honey, I hear you wrote a book. I was like, yeah. I said, look, I've got you a copy. So we were filming a little bit, and then we're going to reposition things. So she was sitting there reading it, and of course I forgot. The book's a bit raunchy in places. So I said, Dolly, sorry, I just meant to apologize about the book. She went, what? I said, you're just looking through it. I said, there's a few raunchy scenes. She went, without a word of lie, she went, honey, I just love a book like this. You read it, you get into it, you have to put it down and take care of business.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say Dolly Parton is a bit on the raunchy side herself. But tell us about Jennifer Aniston. What's she like? Because, I mean, I think everyone kind of likes Jennifer Aniston. You know, she comes, you know, you really felt that they were friends. You know, watching that series, the whole thing. You know, you kind of got personally involved with the characters in that. So what's she like?
And of course, Rachel Ross.
Yeah. Oh.
Every time she comes in, she goes, "We were on a break." She is lovely, absolutely, and a great actress as well. But she's also just lovely. And again, there's that terrible thing, isn't there, where everyone always wants to go, "What do they look like in person?" And she looks stunning. And J-Lo's another one. You know, you sit there and you go, "Oh my goodness me, they really are absolutely stunning." But like, I look across from you there. I have the same feeling.
I thought somebody had come in.
Okay, Jay.
Yes.
Eric
Right.
Wow.
I've got a story here because you know, I've been asked a lot of stupid questions. Not tonight.
Sorry, I didn't mean it. I was really trying.
But
trying.
One of the more stupid ones was would you like to come down to London and interview Eric Clapton? Because, you know, Eric Clapton is God, you know, obviously. You know, for any guitarist or anyone that's ever, you know, listened to Cream and everything all the way through the Yardbirds, back to that, and everything he's done. And I thought, great. I said, normally the record companies used to, you know, if I was going down for something, they would fly me down from Edinburgh. And I said this time, I said, look, you know, you need to send me a copy of the album. It was an album called Pilgrim that was just coming out. And I said, get me a train ticket rather than, I don't want to fly down. And I'll listen to the album on the train on the way down and make some notes, you see. So I get to this very fancy hotel in London. And there was a guy, artist liaison for the record company, Jason, who was actually from Edinburgh. And he said, Jay, you're going to go up. There were only 3 people going to be interviewing him. He doesn't really do it, you know, doesn't like interviews and so on. So they take me up to this beautiful suite. I mean, it was probably bigger than this room, an enormous suite. And he was talking to his manager when I went in, so I get the tape machine set up. And what had been going through my mind all the way down in the train, and I couldn't stop thinking about it, was the tragedy that had happened to his wee boy when he'd fallen from the window in New York. And I thought, you know, how do I just say, I was so sorry, you know, how do I broach that, you know? So there was a track on the album called My Father's Eyes. And I said, you know, there's one of the songs that really impressed me, Eric, on the album is this one, My Father's Eyes. And he said, well, you know, I didn't have a great relationship, he said, with my father, but my son had my father's eyes. And I got that connection, you know. And just at that point when he said that, all the lights in the suite went out, apart from one lamp, which was about 50, 70 feet away in the corner, Everything else went out. We're sitting in darkness. I looked down at the tape machine. It was still turning. And we're sitting there in the dark. And I said, I just wanted to say, Eric, how sorry I was. You know, that was tragic, what happened to your son, Connor, you know. I was so sorry. He was such a beautiful looking wee boy. And so I got into this little bit of conversation with them, and then the lights came back on. And about 5 minutes later, there was a knock at the door, and somebody from the record company said, just wind things up. It's always a bit like that, the scene from Notting Hill, you know, where there's a guy always comes in and says, just one more question, you know. So it's a bit like that. And somebody came in and said, right, can you just wrap things up now, another 2 minutes? I said, fine, you know. And he said, Fiona, you know, did you switch off the lights in here? She said, no. No, you can't switch off the lights from outside the room, no. And he just looked at me, and there was a, you know, just obviously, well, that was a bit weird, wasn't it? That was just, you know, given the subject of the conversation. But it was just a really spooky kind of moment, you know, with them. And that's a photograph from that day.
Beautiful story.
Yeah.
Ross, you're obviously known now for red carpets.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and you sent these incredible pictures. I can see an Oscar in a hand right there as well.
2 Oscars, actually, 2 Oscars. Eddie
Oh,
Redmayne's Oscar, Gary Oldman, and George Clooney. Of all the male stars, George Clooney is right up there with Paul Cooney.
Is he?
And Rosemary. No, George Clooney's one of those guys. Jay knows this so well because all the years that we've interviewed people, and sometimes you go into a room, as you're saying, and you've got the publicist there, and sometimes, weirdly enough, I get sometimes things where they go, you go first, because you hopefully will, lighten it up a little bit sometimes, or like Barbara Streisand can be a little bit like this, and then they're like, Barbara's a bit tired, Ross, can you get in and give it a bit of energy? Which always seems really weird, you're this daft boy from Glasgow, and it's like, can you lighten up Barbara Streisand? But the funniest thing is with George Clooney, he gets it. So the great thing is, if you lob a question to them that is hopefully mildly amusing or whatever, you know that he'll take it and run with it. And so, I would say things like, so George, you've just been voted the sexiest man alive for the second time. You've now got your lovely wife, you've got the twins, you just had another hit movie, but are you happy? And he'll go, well, no. He runs with it. Whereas sometimes you'll get somebody like Kevin Costner would like, yeah, it's a really interesting question. And you go, no, just come on.
Yeah.
But George Clooney is just the best. Just lovely and funny, great actor, obviously. But
Now you've got a wee sort of. I was going to say clique.
What we were going there for a moment. I thought we were back to Elton and the organ.
No. But there's a kind of group of Scots in LA that you kind of hang out with sometimes, played football with and stuff.
Yeah, well, we played football with Rod Stewart a lot, although obviously Rod not actually Scottish. That weird thing, is it?
I see. Well, his dad came from Leith. Mm-hmm. Right, and all these brothers were born in Scotland. He was the only one that was born down south, and if he'd been born in Hong Kong, it wouldn't make him Chinese.
Fair dues. The next line I was about to use is definitely being cut. So, but yeah, no, we've got great. My good pal there, Daniel B, publicist to the Stars, a great PR man. One of my best friends who's come all the way from LA just to be here with his family as well. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well done. We came over from Fife, by the way. I just
cousin came from LA as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's Largs Ayrshire. But Daniel, Jerry Butler, obviously a great pal of mine, so we always have a good laugh. Daniel's a great pal of Jerry's as well. So yeah, it's funny because Daniel and I, we organise a thing called the Burns Bash every January. Instead of a burns supper, I don't know if you find some burns suppers are just the most boring things in the world. They go on forever. So we decided to make a party really that Rabbi himself would have wanted to go to. Yeah. And so we had a great time.
I've seen the photographs and everything of it. It looks amazing. So, it looks absolutely amazing.
So great, Sam Hughes.
I've never been invited, but I've seen the photographs.
And never will.
Thank you.
Anytime, you know that. So yeah.
And on the subject of parties, probably the best party girls in the world.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
The Spice Girls.
Well, that was it. Yeah, that's an interesting position with Emma Bunton, isn't it? Woo!
Sometimes the jokes just write themselves.
Well, that was I did the first ever radio interview with them, and they came in. And you used to get that a lot, I've got, there's a boy band, there's a girl band, there's a new band, whatever. We've got this band called the Spice Girls. We've just signed them to Virgin Records. We're going to bring them in. All right, fine. Do you want? You're going to pre-record it? I said, just bring them in live. We'll just do it live. I'd heard the single, and I thought, well, it sounds quite good. It could be a hit, yeah. If they play their cards right.
There's those instincts right there.
Yeah. So anyway, they came in, and the thing I remember about it is Jerry, Posh Spice. No, sorry, Ginger Spice. I mean,
it's a bit of a clue.
She kind of got them organised. She seemed to be in charge, I thought. Yeah. The rest of them were all sitting talking and whatever. And they did an a cappella version in the studio live with me on air of Wannabe, and it just kind of, after that, they launched on my show, and the next thing you know, wow,
Save the Playhouse.
Straight, yeah, But I mean, I think they did, they did a lot for You know, that whole girl power thing, it all sounds maybe a bit cheesy now, but at the time, actually, I think it really inspired a lot of people. A wee bit like, you know, J.K. Rowling with the Harry Potter books, you know, getting kids to read again. This got a lot of young girls, particularly, back into music. And, you know, I mean, it was enormous at the time, wasn't it? It was absolutely enormous. And the fact that they conquered the world was just fantastic for them. And, you know, I had that photograph hanging up in my office, and all of them, apart from Posh, came to Real Radio. All the other 4 all visited Real Radio at one time or another. And they would come into my office and I'd say, do you remember that? No. I say, have you met Phil Collins?
Cliff? No.
Before we got started, I was organising this event. Obviously, we were talking about the pictures. Jay has said the story a couple of times about contacting Ross and back and forth, and he goes, he sent me a picture and it always wound me up, and I think it was possibly this one right here.
Yes, it was. He sent me that and I thought, bastard. Julia Roberts, you're having seriously. I mean, I mean, personally, I just think, you know, present company exciting. But
is that your whole pass?
But I just think she's just one of the most beautiful. I mean, you know, and Pretty Woman, Notting Hill. You know, I love a rom-com, so you know, I'm a bit, you know, and you know, fantastic actress as well. Erin Brockovich, I thought was just an amazing movie.
Yeah.
Great. But so, tell me about her.
Oh, she. What I love about her is she doesn't suffer fools gladly. So when you're interviewing her or chatting with her, you know that you've got to be on the money. I love that. That she's really sharp. But also what's good, and you know this as well from all the years of interviewing, it's a funny thing sometimes when you're interviewing people, and sometimes there's a question you have to sort of ask, or, you know, again, you dealt so beautifully with Eric Clapton and his son. You know, there's something that people say, well, you really need to talk about it or something. And with Julia, the day that we were doing that interview, it was the time that came out. You remember when all these actresses were paying money to schools to get their kids through college and things? It was a big scandal in America, and it just happened that day. And of course, the producers are going, you know, with Julia, you know, we really need to do this. And I think when and I've been lucky to have met her quite a few times, you get to a point where they're confident enough with you, and they know that you're not going to stitch them up or whatever. And then at one point I said to Julia, I said, you know, obviously today this big news story, and I said, you know, you've got, you know, your kids and you've got your husband Danny, and you know, you're in the business as well. How do you kind of feel about this? And I kind of was like going, how do you feel about this, as in, I'm asking you this question, I know you'll give me a good answer, and then we'll move on. And then she did this whole thing where she said, well, yeah, you know, I feel that if you have to pay money to get your kid through school, you know, it's you're not showing any confidence in your child. And I think, you know, that especially if you're in the public eye like we are, you know, you need to give your child confidence. You don't want to go, I'm buying you a place in school. And then she kind of looked at me and went, and I kind of went, yep, you know, that thing. And so it's like, and now you move on. But the best part was that one of the big bosses from ITV, so this was at the Fairmont Hotel in Santa Monica, and I'd gone out to meet one of the bosses from ITV, and we were sitting outside having a coffee, and they hadn't realised all the interviews had been going on, and I'm sitting a bit like here, and then I could see her look that way, and I wondered, you know, she was like this, and Julia walked just where Tony is there, and she walked by and she went, hey Ross, and I went, hi Julia, and you know, it was that old joke with Frank Sinatra.
Can I ask you a question about it? Because there's lots of, you know, because we haven't had a chance really properly to catch up. But one of the things, could you? I can't imagine doing it. I wouldn't have had the bottle to do it. Could you have done anything even close to what Ricky Gervais did with his opening monologues at the Golden Globes? I mean, just to have the bottle. I mean, we've met a lot of people, a lot of famous people, and some are easier to handle than others. But to imagine standing up in front of that crowd, if you've ever watched those clips, if you haven't, you should watch them on YouTube. Ricky Gervais just standing up and absolutely ripping them all up, you know, at that. You know, look at this table over here. There's Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, and you know, it's just. and Meryl Streep sitting laughing, you know. But everybody looks a bit nervous. To have, could you do anything?
No.
I think he's the only guy that could have got away with it.
For me, and I think it'd be the same for you as well. I mean, Ricky Gervais, I love. I think he's brilliant, and I think he does that brilliantly. But for us, I think it'd be a little bit disrespectful.
Yeah.
You know, I think for us to do something like that, you know, we have laughs. You know, like with Jerry. I mean, Jerry sits there and waits for the. You know, I say, well, Jerry, you know, the Oscars coming along. You know, you'll be watching them. you know. So Jerry Butler. You know, people say to me, "Could you recommend a scary movie?" I say anything with Jerry Butler trying to do an accent. So you know, you can have that banter with you know, friends, and they know that you don't mean it, and it comes with love.
But just to have the nerve to stand up in front of that crowd, I just thought, wow.
You know. Imagine Ricky's agent next week phoning up and saying, "Can you get an interview with Ricky?"
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I love Derek. I don't know if anybody's watched Derek, you know, and Afterlife
Was
and the Office, of course, you know. I mean, it's just genius writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well done for meeting Julia.
This next one I'm a bit jealous of, I have to say. Mickey Dolenz from the Monkees.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, I thought I'd tell this story because some of you may remember there was an elephant at Edinburgh Zoo that wouldn't come out its house, right? And
elephant impressions, everything, eh?
They'd got this elephant
for
from
18 quid.
They'd got this elephant from another zoo somewhere, and they already had an elephant. And by the way, I'm old enough to remember when they used to be able to. They had elephant rides at Edinburgh Zoo.
I just suddenly realised where this story is going.
They had this thing on the top, right? So this elephant wouldn't come out of its thing into the big enclosure. Aye. And so...
Jay's just been heckled by someone shouting, "Sally!"
Yeah, Sally. So someone had said, "We've got Mickey Dolenz coming in." You know, I said, "Oh, great." You know, from the Monkees. And I said, "Oh, but I remember when he was in Circus Boy in the television, and they used to have the opening credits they'd be coming along, and he was riding an elephant." So I thought, "Oh, we'll do the interview at the zoo, and we'll see if we can get the elephant to come out." So Mickey Dolenz, that was the expression he had on the face the whole time. Because I said, "Right, Mickey, what we're going to do," I told him the story, and I said, you used to work with elephants." He's like, "What? What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, Circus Boy, you're right." "Yeah," he said, "we had a handler." You know, and so I said, "How the hell are we going to get this elephant out?" So anyway, I'm standing in the enclosure with this elephant, and with the keeper from Edinburgh Zoo, and I'm interviewing him first. So I'm saying, you know, "Why do you think it won't come out?" "Well, we've had ideas from all around the world. People have been writing to us. We've had thousands of letters and suggestions why it won't come out. It would come to if this was the barrier, it would come out, but it always kept one foot in case they tried to shut the door, and then it would just go back in again. You see, and so I'm standing interviewing this guy, and he said, "Don't stand too close to it because I'm not actually the elephant keeper. The elephant keeper's off work." And I said, "Why? What happened to him?" He said, "The elephant leant against him and broke his arm, pushed him up against the thing, and broke his arm." And he said, "And it knew what it was doing." And I'm standing there with an elephant here, zookeeper here, and a microphone in my hand, and the elephant just went, and it went like this with its trunk, and went like that, and covered me in elephant snot from head to foot. So then I'm get Mickey. And I said, "Come on then, get the elephant out." That was the expression. But
brilliant.
You know what happened? The end to that story, of course, is the other elephant died, and as soon as the other elephant died, the elephant came out. It was frightened of the other one.
My cousin Nori, he loves a sad story, so he'll like that one.
Yeah.
He's a professional mourner now. So.
Sometimes I pinch myself in moments like this.
You pinch yourself? I've just seen Jay Crawford do an impression of an elephant.
So when I was starting doing the podcast, obviously I had dream people I wanted to try to get on there. I'm very lucky with the 2 guests I've had here, but there's one that I really wanted, and it was this man right here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
The big one. You've got to tell me what he was like.
he was the first time I'd met Billy when I was very young at Radio Clyde, actually. I hadn't seen him for years, and you know that way you'll never remember me. So there was a lovely little coffee shop in LA, and I was walking down I got out of the car, walking down to the coffee shop, and then out of the blue, all I heard was, "Oh, hello, Ross the fucking boss. How you doing? You've gone a bit rock and roll, haven't you?" I was thinking, it's Billy Connolly.
Yeah.
And then I did a play read. So I got this phone call from Eric Idle from Monty Python. And he was doing this, it was, What About Dick? It was a play for radio. And he called me up and he's like, "Ross, Eric here, just wondered, could you come up and read in for the play?" And I was like, "Of course, Eric, for you." He said, "Billy's out of town, so I just need you to come and read in Billy's part." I was like, "Okay, fine, no problem." So I get to the house. Well, I mean, it's like every big star is sitting around this table doing this read. I mean, it was like, Frasier himself. You had all, I mean, I won't bore you with all the names, but everyone's sitting there and I'm going, "Oh my goodness me." It's like, people are laughing. I'm going, "It's all right. This is just another play read for you. This is like, a career highlight for me." So I do the whole bit. Thankfully, it goes quite well. Then they actually really are doing it in the theatre. And so Billy was there. And I'm standing there and somebody said, "Sometimes Billy can be a wee bit funny, and especially if something's gone a wee bit wrong or whatever." And I was sitting there thinking, well, I just read it and I tried to do it and all this, but next minute out of the blue, all I hear is, "I can Ross the boss. Try and not be so good next time. Leave some jobs for me."
Did anyone see that little tribute thing that was done just quite recently, just a few months ago, a few people talking about Billy, almost as if he'd already passed away. I mean, it was actually really quite emotional, because he is definitely, without a doubt, I think, anyway, the funniest man on the planet, in living memory, certainly. But the first time I met him was at the Cali Hotel in Edinburgh, and there was a guitarist called Robin Trower, who was playing at the Cameo in Lothian Road, and at the Cali in Lothian Road. And so I was on air in the evening doing Edinburgh Rock, and then I was to go along and interview Robin Trower. So I get there, and there was a guy called Jimmy Dewar, who was a Scottish bass player. He'd been in Stone the Crows, and he was now playing for Robin Trower. So I arrive at the hotel, and I'm taken up to this room, and again, it's a suite. And I walk in, and there's a party happening. This is just after the gig. So Robin Trower's there. Frankie Miller, he was sitting on with a guitar, singing Randy Newman songs. I'm a redneck. He was singing. That was all going on in the corner with Jimmy Dewar. And Billy Connolly was sitting on a chair like this over against the wall, and he was just sitting like this. And every now and again he would go like that. So somebody had slipped him something, or he'd taken something, but he couldn't speak. So Billy, the first time I meet Billy Connolly, and he couldn't actually say a word. And I end up going through to the bedroom with Robin Trower to do the interview away from all this mayhem. I mean, there've been times that I've turned up, and you'll have found this too, but especially with bands, after a gig, going back to a hotel to do an interview, and it's serious rock and roll, sex, drugs, rock and roll going on in some of these rooms, and you don't know where to put yourself. Yeah.
There's Elton John's organ coming in again.
some people obviously do know where to put themselves, and they're already putting themselves there. But you know, I mean, there've been a few times. I'm not sure if I can tell those stories here or not, since it is going to be broadcast as a podcast.
But on the rock and roll legends,
Yes.
goes nicely to this man.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I really screwed up with him, actually, because the first time I met him and interviewed Roger Daltrey was, I think it was in the Albany Hotel in Glasgow. They knocked it down. It used to be right next door to Radio Clyde, and it was the kind of Radio Clyde gang hut. You know, everybody went to the Albany, and all the bands stayed there and everything. And I did an interview with him, and he really kind of took to me, I think, and he was, you know, I was asking him about, you know, because this was in the 70s, I'm asking him about Woodstock, you know, and because it was probably 1976 or something. Woodstock was, you know, only 7 years earlier. And he's saying, you know, he's telling me about Woodstock. He said it didn't matter what you drank or what you ate or how you breathed, everything was spiked at Woodstock. Everyone was completely off their heads. Now, completely out of it. But he's always been, you know, pretty much teetotal, never did drink or drugs or whatever. You know, he's a pretty straight guy. And I got on really well with him in the interview. And then I got a phone call a few days later from somebody at the record company. He said, Roger wants to invite you to come down. He's not done this with anybody else, and wants you to come down and listen to the work he's doing in the studio and everything. And I didn't go. I don't, why didn't I go? You know.
You were out with Cliff Richard.
Yeah. But anyway, I've met him a few times since, and Don and I went to see him. Thanks to Sam and Louise, who are sitting there for my 70th birthday last year. They gave me
70.
Yeah. They gave me tickets to go and see Roger Daltrey. You know, a round of applause. Yeah. Well done, not dying. They gave me tickets for my birthday to go and see Roger Daltrey at the Usher Hall, and he's 82 or something now. And man, he sounded fantastic. He really was brilliant that night, wasn't he, dear? And so, you know, God bless him anyway. I think he's, one of the greatest singers and frontmen of a rock band that this country's ever produced.
I've put a couple more years together now, Ross, because they have a common theme.
All right.
Scottish.
Hey!
Hey.
Here we are, look at that. The Lorraine, who is, again, just everything you want it to be. Jerry Butler, we talked about Jerry earlier on. Lulu, I always thought that Lulu hated me.
Oh.
And what happened was that when I was doing a show, Pebble Mill, way years and years and years ago, and Lulu came on, and as she sat down, and it was a cold, it was snowy, it was around about Christmas time, it was snowy, and I said, Lulu, we've never met before, though we're both Scottish, and I feel that we have, and it's a freezing cold morning, and I just want to know that when you get up in the morning and you try to start your car, did it go, way? And she looked at me like that.
Right, okay.
But since then, she's become a really great pal. Again, with the Burns Bash, I got this call from her one year saying, Rossi, you've got this Burns Bash thing, can I come to it? And I was like, of course you can. And she said, can I sing at it? I mean, you'd go, and we'd only really had a couple, hadn't we, down? And it was this incredible thing. And I remember being on that stage and going, I really can't believe this thing that we started as just a bit of fun for ourselves, that I'm actually going to say, please welcome Lulu. And she came, she sang Amazing Grace, she did shout, she was just, so yeah, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I met Lulu a few times, interviewed her a few times, and we worked together as well on the Tartan Clef Awards.
Oh, yeah.
In Glasgow, a couple of 2 or 3 years running. We introduced the whole evening and all the awards, and she was such a pro to work with on stage, where we were, there were about 16 or 17 awards, and we handled the whole thing together. And of course, you forget, that she did loads of television shows, movies, obviously, To Sir With Love and stuff, but a complete professional. And and really nice, lovely to work with.
And when she came out, we were talking about it, she was 16 and she had the #1 song in America and the #1 movie, To Sell His Love.
Wow.
16? Oh,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
On a completely different feel, Bob Carroll G's and Spit the Dog.
Well, I thought I'd throw that one in for any Tiswas fans. It was the Bucket of Water song, which they released, and that's me with Spit the Dog. And you know,
Brings back memories, doesn't it?
lots of people, you know, that obviously that we've met over the years, you know, lots of famous people. And there was, I want to tell the story because there's so many, especially in the early days. In the early days. Well, there's a story along those lines coming. So we didn't have smartphones with cameras in those days. So there was so many. For example, Mark Bolan, I interviewed him a couple of times, and it would have been lovely to have had a photograph with Mark Bolan. Tragically, of course, he was killed in that car crash. But I was standing, the Radio 4 studios were in the basement. There was a security door halfway along the corridor. And I was standing holding the door open for one of the girls, Ruth, that worked in the newsroom, and she did some of the interviews. And there was a guy walking along behind her with a suitcase. And as soon as I saw him, my eyes lit up because this took me back to when I was a wee boy growing up in North Berwick. Because I saw him coming along the corridor, and I said, "It's Lenny the Lion in that suitcase." And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh my God." I said, you know, I had a cat when I was wee, and you know, my mum and dad said, "What do you want to call the cat?" And I said, "I want to call it Lenny, go after Lenny the Lion." So, and he said, "Oh, it was very nice." Terry Hall, his name was, not the one in Fun Boy 3, obviously. But so I shook his hand, and said, "Oh, I was a big fan. I loved Lenny the Lion when I was wee." So I'd just come off here, and I went up to my office. And I'm sitting in my office for about half an hour, and I came out into reception, and they used to show tours of people round Radio 4 in those days. And it was a tour just waiting to be shown round, all these kids and people standing in reception. And Terry Hall was there, but Lenny the Lion was out the suitcase. "Oh, everybody, this is Jay, and he's my biggest fan. He had a pussycat, and he named it after me." And my face just went whoosh, like this. And sadly, I don't have the photograph of me shaking hands with Lenny the Lion, so I thought I'd throw in Spit the Dog instead.
Well done.
Now, obviously, we've had some incredible stories about people here, but we are getting to what I can probably cast as legends that you've sent in now. Ringo Starr, The Rock, and Al Pacino.
Oh, exactly. There's my cousin Evie going, "Oh, it's my Al." So Ringo again, just brilliant. We sat and it was one of those ones again where, you know, the publics come in and say, "You've got like 15 minutes," and we're chatting 20, 25, and he was just, the stories with Cilla Black, and I mean, the stories were just phenomenal. And
Was he on Blind Date?
He was, yes. And he also, there was that legendary story, which is not really true, which is, you know, the whole thing when the Beatles go to America and they go to John Lennon, "Is Ringo Starr the best drummer in the world?" And he goes, "He's not even the best drummer in the Beatles."
Yeah.
Which was wrong, because Ringo Starr is a brilliant
He is,
drummer,
yeah.
and he's left-handed, but he plays right-handed. It's a weird old thing for drummers, but he just was everything again that I wanted him to be.
Yeah, and he had a doorbell named after him as well.
I was going to do Spit the Dog and Shirley Bassey had a song together, and it was "The Minute You Walk in the Joint." And I thought it was too lame. But you can't, you know, The Rock, just again, one of those guys. He is brilliant. It's a little bit like the royal family, you know, when somebody sort of whispers, you know, you go into a room, you know, and it'll be like, and they go, "Hey Ross, oh man, we were in Hawaii, remember?" You know, and he does all that, which is just so professional and so on the case, and his biceps are bigger than my head.
Wow.
And then Al Pacino. So my cousin Evie here, huge Al Pacino fan. Again, it was one of those weird ones where I just got on really well with Al. Weirdly enough, one of the things that we talked about was that he rented a house from Jackie Collins. Jackie Collins became a pal of mine with all the book writing and stuff. He rented the house next to her, It was Jackie's house that he actually rented from her. And then without a word of a lie, if you remember the movie Scent of a Woman, he would play tennis and he would hit the ball and go, hoo-ah! Hoo-ah! I mean, he really genuinely did. And so he confirmed the story when I chatted to him. But he was so nice. So we chatted away, and again, this interview went on, and they were on a Zoom from London, and everyone was, because it was all about Al's book. It was Sonny Boy, which was the name of the book. And at the end of it, I said to him, look, my cousin Evie is just your biggest fan. And he did a video for Evie. You know, that was just lovely, wasn't it?
Can I tell a quick Ringo story?
Yes.
So I get invited, I think it was 1977 or 78, and there was a big concert happening down at what used to be a World War II aerodrome outside of London called Blackbush. And Bob Dylan was the star of the show. But Eric Clapton was playing, I think it was Joan Armatrading, Graham Parker and the Rumour, there was a whole list of bands playing. And I'd been invited by A&M Records. And so I got down to London the night before, because we were getting picked up at 9 o'clock in the morning on a bus from A&M to take us out to this gig. So we're all on the bus with Gallagher and Lyle there, Benny and Graham, who are dear friends still. But we get to the gig, and there's a lot of wine being drunk. And one of the guys, the guy that ran or owned Moe Shandon at the time, was a huge Eric Clapton, Bob Dylan fan. So he put up a marquee backstage with just free Moe all day. And all the different record companies that were there all had sort of tents and marquees. And A&M had just the bus, which they had big buckets full of ice with drinks and whatever. And so anyway, around about 7 o'clock that evening, I'd fallen asleep on the bus, having probably had too much wine. And there was a guy that worked at Forth who was there as well, called Sandy Wilkie, and he was trying to wake me up, saying, Bob Dylan's coming on, Bob Dylan. And he couldn't wake me up. So he took a cold can of Coke out of one of the buckets, put it up my T-shirt after shaking it, and then opened it. So that woke me up. And so he disappeared, and there were 400,000 people at this gig. And I'm trying to get round to the bit that we'd been watching all the bands for. It was absolutely packed because they'd closed all the bars. And so I go onto the bus and I grabbed 2 bottles of red wine. And I got to the back of the stage and I waited until nobody was looking, and I crawled underneath the stage. Right, so Bob Dylan's actually on stage playing, and I'm going like this commando style with 2 bottles of red wine. And I get to the front of the stage, and now Bob Dylan's right above me, about 12 feet above me, you know, and I lift a bit of tarpaulin, and because it was Bob Dylan, it wasn't going to be people rushing the stage, you know, it wasn't people screaming and everything. Everybody was probably having a very nice time, and I lift the tarpaulin, and it was a bit like, you know, Nazi Germany, where they're going back and forward like that with 2 security guards, and they get to the middle and then turn around and walk back. So I waited until they got to the middle, and then I'm like this with the 2 bottles of wine, and there was just one guy sitting on a chair right in front of the stage, and of course it was Ringo. So I'm like this, and I didn't realize it was him at first, and I said, do you want a drink? And he went, yeah, he was still drinking now. So he took 1 bottle of red wine, I had the other one, and we both watched Bob Dylan together.
Not to be outdone with these legends as well, the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, well, Don, you're in that one as well. There you are. I've done that a few times with the Stones. They do this thing where, you know, come backstage and meet the Stones, have your photograph taken with them. They literally come in for like a minute, you know, 45 seconds. You get the photograph taken. They go, right, enjoy the gig, and off they go. But you know, the Stones for me, I mean, the fact that they are still going, and Mick Jagger in his 80s running about outperforming.
Someone's the favourite down there. You'll have a bit of meat, don't you? A little bit of that, you know. Maybe there's a little bit of meat.
But I mean, just they're just amazing to still be going from 1964 to the present day, 60 odd years, and still, you know, perform. And their latest album, which we've been playing a lot on Edge too, is just fantastic. One of the best albums they've done in years.
We're gently running out of time, so just to finish it off, obviously you both worked with some incredible people. Do you have a favourite? Who did you like? Who was your favourite introduction?
You go.
Michael Hutchins.
Oh.
I met Michael. It was one of those ones when you talk about if the Tate Modern, the Tate Gallery, wanted to do an exhibition and say this is a rock star's bedroom, they should have copied Michael Hutchins's hotel room the first time I met him. I get one of those ones again, get taken up to the room, and he opened the door, introduced myself, go in. I'm looking at this bedroom going, what on earth has been going on in here? I mean, there were, sort of ice buckets and bottles of champagne turned upside, and the bed's unmade, and it just looks like, don't allow anybody to come in here and fix the room. He's been in there, I don't know how long he'd been in there, but it looked like he'd been in a fortnight. And I was just like, wow, what's been going on? Anyway, he and I just got on so well. We just hit it off. And his manager in the UK was a guy called Paul Davis. And that night they were playing in London at, I think, the Hammersmith Odeon. And at one point, they said, Michael's on stage, and he says, anyone here from Australia? And 3,000 people went, yay! Because it was just, nobody was interested. They couldn't get arrested in this country, really, as a band. Nobody was interested. And, they were all slagging him off because he was wearing leather trousers and whatever. Who's this band from Australia? Blah, blah, blah. So the album that had just come out was called Listen Like Thieves. And so it was before Kick, which was the biggest album. And every time they came to Glasgow, I'd get a phone call from the manager, right, the boys are coming up, they're staying at Devonshire Gardens, we've booked you a room, Jake. Right, great. Because I was so impressed with them that I put them on at the Playhouse, and we sold 1,800 tickets. It wasn't a sellout, but it was the most successful concert of their tour. And I was just going on Radio 4 every day saying, you've got to come and see this band. They're brilliant live. You've got to come and see them. So the next time they came back, and I co-promoted the concert again, it sold out. It was the only gig that sold out in the UK. So they never forgot that. The people that you meet right at the beginning of their careers, if they appreciate that bit of help, it tends to last a lifetime. So the last time I saw them, Don and I had gone through, they were playing the Badlands, the last gig of their tour. They'd had to cancel a gig, so they came back and did the Badlands, and they loved the Badlands. And we've got somebody from the band said, we're having a party back at the office. Where is that again? Is it Exchange Square, Royal Exchange Square in Glasgow or whatever? This nightclub, and they'd taken it over just for the night. So there was nobody else in, just the band and entourage, whatever. So their manager had said to me, Kurt Pengilly, the saxophone player, he just recently got married, and his wife was a DJ, and she was on the decks, but nobody was dancing. And Paul said to me, you and Don go up and just have a dance, see if you can get it. I said, no problem. So we go on the dance floor. And Michael hadn't turned up at that point. And we were dancing, and I saw Michael coming in, and he went up to Paul Davis at the bar, and I could see Paul Davis pointing over to us. And Michael looked over, and he came walking onto the dance floor, and I gave him he gave me a big hug, and he said the nicest thing that anyone's ever said to me. He said, I wondered if you'd show up, mate. He said, because when I think of Scotland, I always think of you.
Oh, beautiful.
And he died just a few months later. That was the last time I saw him. And I was actually heartbroken when I found out about his death. He was one of the most charismatic men I've ever met. And for all the women here tonight, if you'd met Michael Hutchins, he had a couple of techniques that I noticed over the years with him. The first thing was that when he started talking to a woman, he somehow developed a slight lisp. And I think...
It's not unfortunate that lisp, if you've got a lisp, lisp's such a hard word to say.
It isn't it? When you think about it.
If you've got a lisp. Sorry,
But he, you know, he did that, and I think it was to try and be a little bit more vulnerable, perhaps. But the other thing that he did was, when he was talking to a woman, his voice would get lower and lower and lower, you know, so they would have to lean into what he was saying. And before then they would be sitting on his knee trying to hear what he was saying. But he was so charismatic, great singer. He was like the Jim Morrison of that era, I think, in many ways. But a very, very sexy individual, Michael Hutchins.
Yeah, just quickly, actually, I want to say as well, my old pal Sarah Cairns is here, who hosted all my book parties at the Mandarin Oriental in London. So thank you to you.
Yay!
Good to see you here. Daniel B coming all the way from LA and bringing his lovely family with him as well. Everyone else coming, my own family, my little sis Elaine, Jim, Ewan, Chloe, cousin Evie, Ginty, Nori, Bridget, Paul also as well, because the man who gave me my break and has been a great mentor to me as well. My cousins as well, Lauren. It's Lindsay's birthday tomorrow, so happy birthday, Lindsay. But yes, so thank you all for coming. It's been great to meet JJ. You were saying the two. I think for me it was a thing with two. I was in London. I think it was the Queen Elizabeth Halls, and I had to introduce it on stage. And I was backstage, and it was going to be Michael Caine, not talking like young Michael Caine up there. No, it was like Michael Caine. No. And then Sean Connery. So I'm standing in the wings, and I'm just like, oh my goodness me, and I'm going to go out on stage and introduce them. And at that point, they came out to me and they said, Ross, sorry, bit of bad news. I was like, what is it? They went, he's got to go off filming, so he's just going to go straight on, come straight off. And I was like, okay. And even as they told me, Sean walks out, standing ovation. Walks off, standing ovation. And I'm standing in the wings, and he walked off, and I went, so Sean, I said, oh my goodness me. I said, you walked on, you got a standing ovation. You walked off, you got a standing ovation. I said, how does that feel? And he went, Ross, you'll never know.
Well, you might get one tonight, you never know.
Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, would you please give a massive round of applause for my guest tonight, Jay Crawford and Ross Caine.
Thank you.
Oh, so lovely. Oh, there you go. Hey!
Well done.